As you can see on your screens, you have there the title, our topic, which will be about approaches in identifying the samples. So, paliwanag na lang po natin kung anong ibig sabihin ng approaches in identifying the sample size so that maging malinaw sa inyo kung ano yung magiging topic o ano yung tatalakayin natin. So, when we say approaches in identifying the sample size, kung sisimplihin natin, ibig pong sabihin ating pong pag-aaralan ngayon ang iba't ibang paraan kung papaano natin malalaman kung ilan bang participants, ilang tao yung ating magiging respondents sa research. Okay, yung samples. So, ulitin ko, ang ating magiging topic for today ay kung papaano natin ma-identify, papaano natin pipiliin ang ating mga samples. Samples, also known as participants or respondents, ating research. Okay? For example, kapag gagawa tayo ng survey research, so isa sa mga tanong bago natin masimulan ang ating research ay ilang tao ba ang ating survey? So, ngayon po ay ating po tatalakayin kung paano malaman kung ilang tao ba dapat ang ating maging respondents. Okay, so I hope na klaro po. So now let's go to our next page. First, let us recall. So last Tuesday, we were able to discuss, kung tatandaan nyo pa, we were able to discuss about the population and sample. So if you could scroll down sa page na ito, makikita nyo yung last nating stream was about sampling methods, if I'm not mistaken. So, pinag-aralan natin yon. So, this is a continuation of that lesson last Tuesday. So, last time we were able to know that kapag sinabi natin population, ito yung mga grupo na kung saan ang mga members na bumubuo ng grupong ito ay merong common na it could be attitude or behavior or any characteristics na meron silang common. So, tinatawag natin siya population. So, and more importantly, kapag sinabi natin population, ito yung total set of observations. Pinaliwanag natin bakit sinabing total observations. For example, in the list of people in a town, for example, in a city, so, makukuha natin yung number of people ng buong city, buong town, so our observation, based on listings, di ba? So, ito yung population. At itong population, ito yung kukunan natin ng sample. Namin yung sample. This is a smaller group na kinuha lang din galing sa population. Or we could say that this sample is the smaller group that will represent the whole population. Okay? Kaya nga tinatawag siyang population in question. Kasi siya yung i-question. Hindi na yung buong population, but rather itong sample lang ang magiging respondents or participants mo. Siyang tatanungin ng mga katanungan related sa research. So that is about population and sample. So I hope na malinaw na ang klase lesson na yan. So let us proceed to our lesson. Now, let us take up approaches in identifying the sample size. So for today, I expect that we have 4 approaches in identifying the sample size. And the first one, pinakauna dyan, ay yung tinatawag natin heuristics. So nakikita nyo yung table na nasa baba. Is an example of heuristics. Na kapag sinabing descriptive research, yung number of participants natin nakukuha ay 10%. 10% ng total population. So it could be 100 times 0.10. 100 times 0.20. Okay? Kapag descriptive research. And if it's comparative research, 15 subjects or groups ang ating magiging participants. So, ano ba yung heuristics? Kapag sinabing heuristics, this approach refers to the rule of the thumb. Ano ba yung rule of the thumb? Ano yung rule of the thumb? So, ito daw yung approach ng pagpili ng ilang participants na magbabase sa sinabi nating rule of thumb. Ito yung proseso na kung saan hindi siya kinompute, pero ito yung most or usual na ginagamit. Walang formula sa pagpili. Walang particular na formula, pero ito yung madalas na ginagamit. Kaya sila tinatawag na rule of thumb. So you have there yung 10% to 20%. Hindi siya particular na talagang 10% lang. Okay, it's in between 10% 20% yung research. And we have also, kung sinabi natin comparative research, nasa baba yung table, we have 15 subjects or groups. So, ibig sabihin, although hindi siya nakabase sa isang specific computation, but still, usable siya kasi ito yung madalas na nagagamit. So, I hope that's clear. You can also take note kapag sinabi nating rule of thumb, this is a rule or principle. You can write it down. Take note. Pag sinabing rule of thumb, it is a rule or principle that you follow which is not based on exact calculations but rather on experience. Yan po yung tinatawag na rule of thumb. Okay? It's a method of judging a situation or condition that is not exact but is based on experience. If you have any questions, so do not hesitate to comment. So this is the first approach, which is heuristics. The K phrase to remember kapag sinabi natin heuristics, ito yung rule of the thumb or rule of thumb. Yun yung sinusunod nating process sa pagpili ng ating magiging respondents. So the early established approach by Gay, stated by Cristobal and Dela, Cruz, Cristobal, sample sizes for different research designs are the following. Yan ay yung descriptive research at saka yung comparative research. Kapag sinabing descriptive, yung ating pagpili ay magiging 10 to 20%, between 10% to 20% yung kinakailangan nating magiging respondents or participants. Kapag sinabi natin comparative research naman, 15 subjects or groups, ating pwedeng 15 tao or 15 grupo piliin natin kasi ko-compare yan. From the word comparative research. Okay, those groups will be paired. So, yun po yung rule of thumb. That's heuristics. Okay? And now let's go to the continuation of heuristics, which will still be about rule of thumb. So, here is another example of rule of thumb based on research design. So it is by Lunenburg and Irby, as cited by Barot. Also suggested different sample sizes for each quantitative research design. So since we are practical research, so very much applicable sa ginagawa. So kung survey daw, rule of thumb niya, rule of thumb. So for example, in your defense, tatanungin kayo, bakit 800 yung pinili yung number of participants sa inyong survey research? So you can answer the professors or teachers na this is the rule of thumb when doing the survey of research. So rule of thumb na 800 yung survey research. So pag tinanong kayo sino, yun yung gagamitin nyo. It is from Lunenburg and Irby. And find the exact publication by Lunenburg and Irby. So sasabihin nyo, this is by Lunenburg and Irby. And we have correlational research. Kapag sinabi natin correlational research, rule of thumb naman na ang participants na mai-involve sa iyong research ay 100 to 200 persons. Kapag ex post facto na research, should be 30 plus, or meaning 30 or more. Not 30 or more, but more than 30. Okay. And when it comes to experimental, it should be 30 or more. Right? So, in your defense, yun ang nga sinasabi ko sa inyo. Kapag tinanong kayo na professor nyo why you're using this number of participants based on your research design, let's just say experimental, but 30 lang yung ginamit mong participants. You can say that this is the rule of thumb when doing experimental research, and this is from Lunenburg and Irby. That's about heuristics. So I hope naklaro. If you have any questions, again, do not hesitate to comment. Alright, so let's go to the next approach. So this is the first approach in identifying the sample size. Okay, so the second approach will be literature review. Okay, isa na ginagamit yung literature review para ma-identify natin kung ano din yung gagamitin nating approach sa sample size. So, bakit nagagamit ang literature review? Bakit kino-consider natin siyang approach in identifying the sample size? So, we have here another approach is by reading similar or related literature and studies to your current research study. So, napakasimple lang po yung sagot. Bakit approach din yung literature review. Literature review. It is because kapag nagbabasa ka ng iba't ibang mga research, you can see that there are some research na related sa'yo na yung pagpili nila ng sample size is pwede mo din gamitin. This is another approach. This is another way so that you will know how many people you are going to include in your study. This is literature review. So, please think about kung gaano kahalaga yung literature review. Even kahit pa sa pag-identify natin kung ilan o pag-determine natin kung ilan ang magiging sample size na mai-involve sa ating research. So, using this approach increases the validity of your sampling procedure. So, merong advantage siya kapag galing sa literature review. Kung ang inyong pagpili ng number ng participants o inyong pagpili ng kung gaano kadami magiging participants nyo ay base na din sa ibang ginawang research. Okay, although hindi naman pareho talaga sa research nyo, iba niya, but is applicable to your research. So, nai-increase na yung validity. Ibig sabihin, nai-increase na yung magiging accurate ng sampling procedure. Let me give you an example. Let's just say, tinanong ka ng professor mo, how sure are you na tama yung pagpili mo ng number ng participants? So, you can just easily say, I am sure about the approach that I use in determining the number of participants because this process was already done by author. Alamin nyo siyempre kung anong pangalan ng researcher behind that research na pinagbasihan nyo na kung paano ma-determine nyo yung sample size. So, that's how important it is for us to also make use of literature review in thinking about how to determine sample size. So, that's it. So, that's the second approach. So, we have here for the next page, the third approach in identifying sample size, or just to make it simple, the third way on how you can identify or determine the number of your participants is this so-called power analysis. Okay, this is power analysis. This approach is founded on the principle of power analysis. There are two principles you need to consider if you're going to use this approach. So, medyo mahirap ipaintindi kung ano yung power analysis, except kung malalaman nyo na tong dalawang principles na kinakailangan nyong maintindihan. So, these are statistical power and effect size. So, statistical power at effect size, kung wala ito, there's no such thing as power analysis. So, kailangan malaman muna natin kung ano ang statistical power and effect size. So, let us go to the next page. So, kapag sinabing statistical power, ano yung statistical power? This is the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis. Is called statistical power. Ibig sabihin, yung percentage na marireject yung null hypothesis. So, I hope na naalala nyo pa kung yung hypothesis. So, kung yung null hypothesis marireject, ibig sabihin, ma-accept natin yung alternative hypothesis. Last time, we were able to discuss that already. So, I think there's no need for me to repeat it because it would take us too much of our time kung i-repeat pa natin. So, kapag sinabi natin statistical power, this is yung percentage na maaaring ma-reject yung null hypothesis. Okay, that is a statistical power. It suggests that indeed there is a relationship between the independent and dependent variables of research study. So, may statistical power. Even before the conduct of the research, meron ng statistical power. Okay, magagamit po natin to when it comes to identifying the number of participants that we will use in our research study. Because this is the element that suggests na meron talagang relationship yung independent sa dependent variable. Kasi kung wala din namang statistical power, I think it is not necessary for to do a research because wala namang suggestion na may relationship in independent-dependent variable. Kaya nga, nagre-research ka tungkol sa independent sa dependent variable ng study mo kasi meron kang theory na meron talaga silang relationship, right? So what I'm saying is, kapag sinabi natin statistical power, this is the percentage na maaaring ma-reject yung null hypothesis. Okay, so that's the statistical power. So the ideal statistical power of a research study is 80%. Okay, yun yung ideal. Yun yung katanggap-tanggap. Okay, 80% yung statistical power. Ibig sabihin, 80% sure ka na yung null hypothesis hindi siya matatanggap. So 80% sure ka na ang matatanggap. So with the statistical power, it will be used to identify the sufficient sample size for measuring the effect size of a certain treatment. Yung statistical power daw, ito yung pwedeng gamitin It's not just pwede, but ito yung gagamitin to identify kung ilan yung nararapat na dami ng sample size. Okay? For measuring the effect size of a certain. So again, yung statistical power, ito yung gagamitin para ma-identify kung ilan yung dapat na dami ng iyong respondents. Para ma-measure daw natin yung effect size ng treatment na ibibigay. We're talking about, let's just experimental. For measuring the effect size of a certain treatment, so kinakailangan po nating gumamit ng statistical power. Ano ba yung effect size? Okay, since we're talking about effect size. So in the next sentence, sinasabi, the level of difference between the experimental group and the control group refers to effect size. So yung level naman, yung kaibahan ng experimental group tsaka yung control group, ito yung effect size. At yung statistical power po ay magagamit din po natin para ma-measure yung effect size ng certain treatment. Let's go back with this sentence. With a statistical power, it will be used to identify the sufficient sample size for measuring the effect size of a certain treatment. Yun po yung statistical power. Let's simplify. Kapag sinabing statistical power, ito yung percentage na maaaring ma-reject o hindi matanggap ang null hypothesis na siya din gagamitin para ma-identify kung ilan ang tamang dami ng tao na mai-involve sa iyong research. However, kapag sinabing effect size, ito naman yung level ng kaibahan ng experimental group sa control. Alright, now for the next page, so again, this is about power analysis. For the next page, if the statistical power tells that relationship between independent and dependent variables, so kung ang statistical power daw ang siyang nagsasabi tungkol sa relasyon ng independent sa dependent variables, ibig sabihin yung statistical power yung nagsasabi na mayroong relationship yung independent at saka dependent variable. Yung effect size naman, on the other hand, suggests kung ano ang level ng relationship ng dalawang variables. Okay? Yun yung effect size tsaka statistical power. Henceforth, the higher the effect size means the greater the level difference between the experimental and control. So, ibig sabihin, kung mas mataas yung effect size, ibig sabihin, mas mataas din yung level ng difference between the experimental and naturally. Di ba? Kasi, kung ang effect size, ang siyang nagsasabi kung gaano kalawak ang relasyon ng independent at dependent variable. So, maaapektuhan syempre ang level ng difference ng experimental and control group. Because yung experimental at control group, sila yung nagdadala, nagre-represent ng independent at dependent variable. For example, the research study reveals that there is a difference in the pre-test and post-test scores. So, nag-exam yung mga, let's just say, mga element or grade 6 students. Di ba? Sa research mo, nakita mo na merong kaibahan yung scores ng mga estudyante during the pre-test and the post-test. So, in the given anxiety test, so kahit hindi anxiety test, kahit anong test na lang, after implementing psychosocial intervention or teaching intervention na lang, pagkatapos na may teaching intervention na ginawa yung teacher ng elementary, so nalaman na merong difference. Kasi, pag pre-test, wala pa, hindi pa tinuruan. Wala pang nagtuturo kasi pre-test pa. After teaching, so meron ng knowledge, nag-post-test, so merong difference. So, with the effect size, you will have an idea of how small or large the difference is. So, yung effect size, yun yung magbibigay sa iyo ng idea kung gaano kaliit o gaano kalaki yung magiging difference. Okay? So, that's about effect size and statistical power. So if you have any questions, so feel free to ask questions. So the last approach that we are going to discuss today will be about formulas. Okay, so ito na yung pamamaraan kung paano natin pipiliin yung mga respondents ng ating research. Nagagamit tayo ng formula. Ibig sabihin, magkukompute tayo. So let us do this as fast as we can. So formulas are also being established for the computation of an acceptable sample size. Although you can find some other formulas, but during this time, at this point of time, ating pag-aaralan ng formula yung tinatawag na Sloven's formula. Okay? There's one thing that you really need to remember. So, pwede natin gamitin yung Sloven's formula kung yung population na ating i-research ay hindi pa natin alam kung ano ang behavior, kung may common behavior sila. So, I hope that you're ready. I will show you first an example and then later on mag-answer kayo. You can only use Sloven's formula if you know nothing about the population at all. So, we have here an example. So, Sloven's formula. So, we have here where n is a sample size. So, yung n, yung sample size, ito yung magiging answer natin. Ito yung panghuli. Nasa huli, 240. Ito na yung magiging sagot. Ibig sabihin, ito yung i-interviewin mo. Or let's just say, ito yung isa-survey mo. 240 persons. Let's just say there are 600 people. Ito yung population size. 600 people in the whole city. Ilang kayang tao yung pwedeng mag-represent sa 600 na tao sa buong syudad. So, using Sloven's formula, pwede mong malaman kung ilan yung magre-represent sa 600. And then you can also determine kung gaano kakasure. Kasi tatanong yan sa defense, gaano kakasure na marirepresent ng 240 yung 600. And this will be answered by this so-called margin of error. Ito yung letter E. Okay, and this is letter E. Dito, malaking E, pero dito maliit na E. This is just the same. Okay, this is from your module. Okay, so we have N. Kaya yung N is 600. Given na po yung 600. Okay, for example, magre-research kayo, dapat yung malaman kung ilan yung population. Let's just say, nare-research nyo yung buong school. So, magtatanong kayo sa registrar, sino mang personnel na alam, ilan ba lahat ng estudyante sa school nyo. Ito yung number of population. Okay? Which will be 600. So, you will substitute the value. Let's just say, yung example natin sa buong town. Sabihin na lang natin town. So, 600. So, you substitute the value of n as 600. There's 600. And 1 is a constant value. So, hindi yan nagbabago. 1 lang talaga palagi yan. So, this is the Sloven's formula. N is equals to n over 1 plus n e squared. So, it means that this is the sample size equals, the total population size over 1 plus population size times the desired margin of error square. So, we substitute the value of n as 600 kasi 600 yung total population size. So, given na po yan inuulit ko. And the question here now is, saan ang galing yung 0.05? So, when we say 0.05, actually, yung pagpili natin ng margin of error, yes, arbitrary siya. Kapag sinabing arbitrary, based on random choice or personal whim. The only thing to remember is kapag, for example, this 0.05, you're going to convert it as a percentage. This is 5%, diba? 5 yan. So, that's 5%. Meaning, 5% yung margin of error. Or this 5% na hindi ka sure. So, directly speaking, pwede natin sabihin, 5% na hindi ka sure na makaka-represent yung sample size mo sa 600. That's just 5%. So meaning, in the other way around, kung babalik rin natin, you are 95% sure na yung magiging answer ng computation mo ay makaka-represent 95%. Okay, 95% sure ka na makaka-represent itong 240. Sina-answer na, meron ng answer. 240 sa lahat ng tao sa tao nyo, which is 600. So again, 0.05 there, yung margin of error is arbitrary. Sino magde-decide yan? Ikaw mismo. Kayo mismo na researcher. Okay, because this will be used kapag itatanong na sa inyong self-defense nyo. Oh, bakit 240 lang? Ang daming tao, 600. Dapat kalahati yung pinili nyo. So, pwedeng sabihin, sir, we're using Sloven's formula. And this 240 represent the 600 and we are 95% sure based on Sloven's formula since we use 0.05 margin of error in computing the sample size. Okay? So, pwedeng ganun yung sagot natin. So, you have there 600 over 1 plus 600. So, siyempre, pag in-square po natin yung 0.05, so, mangyari po, magiging 1.5. And you copy, of course, the value. And, of course, you can cancel now. You can divide 600 divided by 600. So, yan po yung sagot. So, 600 over 1 plus 1.5. And then, of course, you just follow the procedure. Okay, you have there 600 divided by 1 plus 1.5. the answer will be 240. I hope that is clear. And now I'll give you time to answer this problem for the next. So I'll be giving you 5 minutes to answer this one. Okay, so we have here a problem. A researcher plans, imagine nyo na kayo ito. You are the researcher and you're planning to conduct a survey. If the population on high city is 1 million, 1 million yung population, you need to find the sample size if the margin of error is 25%. Here, sa problem na to, meron ng binigay na margin of error. Hindi ikaw ang mag-decide for this particular problem. So now try to answer it. You have now the given, which is yung N is the total population size or simply the population size, 1 million. And you have the margin of error as 25%. Let us go back to the previous page so that you can copy the formula. Okay, so now I want you to answer it. So I guess that would be all for today's discussion. Before we'll say goodbye. That summarize. Okay, so this is summary of our lesson. So in this lesson, we were able to discuss and we were able to know there were four approaches in identifying the sample size, and these are heuristics, literature review, power analysis, and for. So I hope na meron po tayong natutunan for this day. This is your teacher saying goodbye and thank you, and see you again someday.